After my sister lied about me, Dad threw out my stuff and my kids' stuff and said, "Get out of my house." My sister laughed, "Good luck surviving, loser." We just walked away. What they didn't know was that in 3 days, karma would hit harder than they could ever imagine. I'll never forget standing outside at 9 p.m. holding my 3-year-old son with a ripped trash bag of our clothes. Heather leaned out the front door with that smirk on her face and said, "Good luck surviving, loser." Then she closed the door in our faces. I had $40 in my purse, no car, no plan. My son was crying because his stuffed bear got left behind in all the chaos. That's when I did the one thing I never wanted to do. I called Uncle George. He's my dad's older brother, the successful one. Big house, no kids, divorced twice, private golf membership. I hadn't seen him much in the past year, but I remembered how kind he'd been to me when I was growing up. He answered on the second ring. I told him everything, every ugly detail. He didn't even hesitate. He just said, "Come stay with me." I took the next bus across town and showed up at his gate just before midnight. He opened the door, saw my face, looked at my son, and didn't ask a single question. He just picked up my boy and said, "You're safe now." That was the first time I let myself cry. Next morning, he made pancakes. Didn't even blink when my son spilled syrup across the counter. George poured me a cup of coffee, sat down across from me, and asked what happened. I told him everything. How I'd been living with my parents for 2 months after losing my job. How Heather had been making comments from day one about how unfair it was that Mom cooked for me or watched my son during job interviews. I told him about the missing emergency cash, $12,000. How Heather said she found it in my dresser drawer while looking for her hairbrush. How my dad grabbed a trash bag and started dumping our stuff into it without asking me a single question. George didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "I've been waiting for something like this." He told me he'd always had a bad feeling about Heather, that she'd had this mean streak in her since she was a teenager, but she was always careful to play innocent when it mattered most. Then he picked up his phone and made a call right in front of me. I caught a few words: freeze access, family dividends, audit starting today. He hung up and looked at me. Turns out George owns 60% of the family business. My dad and Heather had access to monthly distributions, but George controlled everything. The next 2 days were quiet, too quiet. George was on the phone constantly. Every time I asked if something had happened, he'd just say soon. On day 3, he came home early and said, "Get dressed. We're going to visit your parents." When we pulled into the driveway, Heather's SUV was there. The front door was slightly open, like someone had walked out in a hurry and forgot to close it. George told me to stay in the car with my son. From the car, I couldn't see much, but I could hear it. The shouting. Heather's voice first, loud and frantic, then my mom crying. At one point, I heard something bawl. Then Heather screaming, "You can't do that. You can't just cut us off." George walked out 10 minutes later, calm as ever. He told me the audit came through. Heather had made a matching withdrawal from the business account the day before the cash disappeared. Same amount, same envelope. She took money from the company to pay a personal debt, then planted it in my room to cover her tracks. She wasn't just trying to get rid of me. She was burying her own theft. George said they're cut off. No more access to family money. No more dividends. They can figure out how to pay the mortgage on their own. Next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from Heather and 1 text from my mom that just said, "Please, can we talk?" George told me, "Don't answer anything. Let them come to you now." That afternoon, he told me the contractors had walked off the job at their house. The kitchen renovation stopped mid-tile. The pool Heather had been bragging about on Facebook canceled. The payment didn't clear. 2 days later, Heather showed up at George's door. No polished hair, no makeup. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She said things were bad, that her husband's job was in trouble because George had informed their business partners about the misuse of company funds, that their credit cards were locked, that Dad blamed her for everything. Then she did something I never expected. She confessed, right there in George's living room. She admitted she took the money from the family account, that she planted it in my drawer, that she wanted me gone because she was tired of hearing Mom talk about how strong I was being. George walked over to his desk and pulled out a photo. Security footage of Heather planting the envelope in my drawer. He slid it across the table. Heather looked at me and asked what I wanted. I told her I didn't want anything from her. Not money, not forgiveness, because it wasn't about what she did to me anymore. It was about what she did to herself. Last week, my parents asked if I would come home. Said they wanted to make things right. I said no, because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And I already had a home now, one where we're wanted.